Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Careers Podcast. In today's episode, we'll be diving into the physical and mental intricacies of learning how to swim and feel confident in the water. My guest today, Jason Cram from Swimly, is here to share some of his key insights as a swim coach that allow him to help people overcome their fears in the water. So, with that said, Jason, when we look at your backstory, you had a really interesting arc and where you've been, what you've seen, particularly with your elite level athletics, swimming alongside some big, huge names. Could you just take me through like how swimming first became a big part of your life and, what led you to competing at the Commonwealth Games level?
Oh, absolutely. It's always a pleasure to talk about this story because I kind of call it my slumdog millionaire lifestyle, where, if you've ever watched that movie, everything that person, went through in his life comes together in that one pivotal moment. And I think that's sort of true to the story that I've had with my years on this earth so far. So if you can see behind me, there is a giant swimsuit. That is one of the relics now from the early 2000s. That's what we call the super suit. But to get prior to that, to just go right from the beginning, I actually started growing up in Wollongong. I lived in Wollongong. It's, less than a kilometre to the beach was where my house was. The beach, the pool, the water, that was a big part of my story growing up. My mother, funnily enough, was actually a quite high up swimmer herself. She trained with Shane Gould, Karen Morass, some of these swimmers who in the 70s went to the Olympics and achieved some amazing things. I only learned that later in life, but swimming was one of those things that was always going to be a part of our family life. And, I just took to it from a very young age, went through the standard sort of learn to swim and then into competitive swimming at, the age of around 7, 8, 9.
That early?
Yeah, quite young, which some swimmers do. You'll see a lot of like the top swimmers in the world that they start quite young. Thorpe, on the other hand, he didn't start till he was in his teenage years. So it varies from every athlete and every person's different story. But yeah, for me, that was just something that I enjoyed, something that I liked, and something I continued with. Kind of around the age of 15, I was a age national champion, and then from there, it just sort of progressed on into getting into a world championship team, a Commonwealth Games team, and a Pan Pacs team, so the Australian swim team, and then a gold medalist at all three of those meets as a part of our 4x200 freestyle relay team.
And it's just burning my curiosity as well, but
Yeah.
actually racing at the Commonwealth Games too, can we just have a little bit on that? Like, what was that like for you, that experience?
Everybody's experience, on the national team's a little bit different. But for me, it was one of those things, it's going to sound really strange because you've obviously trained so much. We'd be training up to 20 hours a week, sometimes, up to 40 hours a week, depending on what level we were at and what we were doing. But usually around 20 hours in the pool, 10 2-hour sessions, and then all the dry land stuff on top of that. But I guess for me, being on the team was a dream, to get the suit behind me. There it is. And to wear that in that green and gold was obviously every kid's dream in any sport to represent their country.
Yeah.
And being at the Commonwealth Games, I'll be honest with you, it was very surreal. It was almost like I was there, but I wasn't there. It's like, especially when we were racing, I remember our 4x200 freestyle relay team. That was probably, for me, it felt like I was watching it from the outside, even though I was there living it. It was very, like, my memories back from it are very, very weird. One of those things you try so hard and want something so bad. And then when you actually get it, you're like, I'm here. And you're trying to take it all in, but there's just so much going on. There's the nerves, there's this energy, especially in a relay team. You've got the pressure of 3 other guys that you don't want to let down. So yeah, a lot of that actually, funnily enough, happened autonomously.
It's also not just something that you get handed to. You can't just go, oh, I'm going to go to the
No.
Commonwealth or the Olympic Games. Like, it's a big deal to even get considered for it. So with that, coupled with, not wanting to let your team down, does that not like create a big shock to the nervous system as well?
I think you kind of have that, as I said, that out of body experience, and until it becomes your normal, because this was my first time onto the national team. So for me, my greatest accolade so far from the sport, even though I've got world champ medal, Com Games medal, for me, it was actually getting my berth into the team, which was at Brisbane. It was that memory of getting third, and it's going to sound super strange, but getting third behind Ian Thorpe and Grant Hackett in the 200-meter freestyle.
Ooh. Wow.
Now, to give the listeners context that don't know, that aren't Australian through and through, Ian Thorpe at the time was the world record holder for the 200, the 400 freestyle, the Olympic champion, the Commonwealth Games champion, the world champion. Hackett was the second pretty much fastest 400-meter freestyler and obviously 200 freestyler in our country. But he was also the Olympic world record holder, the Olympic champion, the Commonwealth Games champion for 1500-meter freestyle. So these are two of the top swimmers Australia have had of all time. And then here, it kind of like sounds weird, but here's like little Jason from Wollongong. And that's how I sort of felt like myself as little Jason from Wollongong getting out third place behind these guys.
It's massive.
Massive, but it's funny. I didn't think it was like that until, probably about 20 years later when I actually realized that.
That actually brings me to the next point that I wanted to bring up in the chat. So one thing that we were talking about in the preliminary section was this imposter syndrome. So being at that elite level is one thing, but then also not feeling good enough. Both things can be true at the same time. How? Can you walk us through more of your experience of that?
It's taken me, I'm not going to lie, around 20 years to unpack this and sort of understand it.
Mm-hmm.
But look, in a nutshell, when you're trying for something, when you're striving for something, there's always this thing, the niggling thing inside of you. And Australians, we kind of call it like the tall poppy syndrome. We're trying to bring you back down again. When you're sort of in a sport that's by yourself, which is what swimming is, even though it's a team environment, it's an individual sport. You're in the water with your own thoughts, own headspace. And, it's one of those things that can really sort of shake you up without you even knowing. Going a little bit deeper, I've had mental health issues previously. I've worked through it all, and I'm 100% better than where I was back then. But at that time, I just didn't know any different. Swimming was my all. The imposter syndrome, that challenge around like that you're not good enough. For me, it was, I didn't achieve my goal, which was to make it on the Olympic team. And I didn't think that I was a good swimmer. Now, to give context behind that, you think, oh, well, you're a good swimmer, the Olympics is easy. At the time, which was straight after Sydney Olympics, I tried for Sydney Olympics. I was a bit young, a little bit immature mentally, saying that I was 18. But then the next one was 2004 Athens. And I'd already done the stepping stone, Commonwealth Games, Pan Pacs, World Championships, and then the very first duel in the pool where Australia versus America. So that was the opportunity that I had to race Michael Phelps as he was coming of age as well. And into the trials, I was just off my PB by like click of a fingers. And that click of a fingers was enough to actually not make the final. So therefore not even have an opportunity to make it to the Olympic team. And that was in my pet event, the 200 freestyle. But when you look back at history and when you look at the results, the top 16 swimmers in the 200 freestyle at our Australian Olympic trials went faster than the 8 swimmers in the final at the Olympics that year.
Right.
So the times that we were racing back then, the depth within Australian swimming, I'm not saying that it's small now, but back then it was huge. It was massive. All of our guys in the national team were like household names, because obviously there's not the dilution that we have with social media now where you really have to sort of follow things. You only had your TV, your newspaper, your magazines, or your radio, but everybody knew who they were. Now it's like you have to sort of follow the sport, and a few people would know a lot, but back then you knew like 15 to 20 people out of the 30, 40 member team. Imposter syndrome for me was because I didn't make to the Olympics, I wasn't a good swimmer. And that, no word of a lie, took 18 years for me to unpack. And with some of the world's most incredible life experience after swimming, which got me to the point of like realizing that I've had a pretty good life and swimming was a pretty good thing.
When I'm hearing you from this side of the fence, right?
Yeah.
Would you say that it's got to do primarily with awareness? Because like when I look at that, like, and you say, oh, a fraction of a second meant that I didn't go to the games, right? Like that might be the fact, but the fact also is that you can swim bloody fast, right? So when I look at that, is it awareness around that distinction and what they mean to you, and working on that is what helps you solve it in the end?
It's going back and reflecting. And I think as you get older in life, you know, here's the old person coming out of me, but I feel like I'm a wise soul. I think I've been here many times before, because the experiences that I've had after swimming would have only happened because of swimming. To give, the listeners a little bit more context, after missing out in the Olympics, it was the same year that Ian Thorpe actually in 2004 at the trials fell in for the race. He was on the blocks. They said, take your marks, and he fell in.
I remember that
It
actually.
was huge, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Even when you look up news stories about it, Prime Minister was involved in at the time, John Howard, and talking about how it was devastating for the country, and
Because it's a disqualification, isn't it?
it was one of the first years, one of the early years where you didn't have a 2-start rule. So they'd actually made it, once you're done, you're out, you're done. Similar to sort of, actually, no, I don't think athletics went down that route. I think they went for that route for a little bit, but then they've gone back to, you get another trial.
I would
But
actually love to ask him how he dealt with that mentally, because I could imagine that would have been shattering for him as well.
that was my squad. That was our squad, was very close knit. It was 6 athletes in that squad, and 6 or 7, and yeah, like that just rocked all of us to the core. That was the very first day. I think it was one of the early races. I'd just finished the 400 free and was watching it from the sidelines. And to be honest, I think even it was one of the times that I actually tucked Thorpe into his suit, because it was that tight. You had to kind of tuck and fold and push him all into it. And that really, like, you're the greatest in the world, the greatest of all time for male right now in this space. And you've just done that.
Yeah.
And nobody, even the official, I spoke to the official a couple of years later, even the official that actually had to go disqualify him was like, I don't want to do this, but I have to.
That is wild.
So that was one of the things that happened back there. But so anyway, obviously, we know the story. He ended up swimming the 400. Craig Stevens, one of my other teammates, gave him that spot. But after I missed out, I was still training, but my passion wasn't there. I think I was so built up around, obviously the ego a little bit, going, I'm going to get there, I'm going to get there. I didn't. That shattered me. And I went training for about another 6 months. And because I was still living at Wollongong and traveling up, I was starting to push the boundaries around what was safe about trying to get there.
Mm-hmm.
So reading between the lines, I was pushing a little bit, not speeding crazy, but pushing the boundaries of sleeping in longer and the time that for me to get up there. And then I just remember one morning, I still haven't had the chat with my coach, Tracy. I want to when I connect with her again about what actually happened. But all I remember is just going and saying, I don't want to do this anymore, turn around and hop back in the car and drove home. And then that ended my swimming career as such right there and there.
Wow. And so this particular moment that you've just expressed, is that the catalyst for you turning to coaching and looking at a different option for you to go? No, what was the catalyst?
The catalyst was, so from swimming, I went on to work for an event management company for a bit of time, which would set up all the Australian Surf Life Saving Championships up to 5 kilometers of beach. Yeah. I did that for a number of years. I then went to work for Disney Cruise Lines in the Caribbean. So I was on the cruise ship traveling around there. I worked on their island for a bit as well as a lifeguard.
Nice.
Which was pretty cool. That kind of gave me my teenage years in my early 20s. We stay up and have parties and that sort of thing, and really be social, because swimming, you weren't social. My 18th birthday was at a training camp somewhere around the world. My 21st was a training camp in Germany getting ready for Commonwealth Games. So that was, that was kind of my big years of coming of age, so to speak. So Disney was sort of where I got to party and express myself a little bit more and meet a whole heap of people. The good thing was the bar was only open on the ship for 1 hour or 2 hours. So you'd go in and pretty much. It was really cheap drinks. Try and walk straight when the ship's rocking. And from there, I actually came back to Australia to work back again. I wanted to travel. Theme that I've had throughout my whole life since is I plant the seed and water it as to what I want. This one was planting the seed to travel my own backyard of Australia, because I've seen quite a bit of the world already.
So you're in your 30s at this point, and where did it all start focusing towards coaching for swimming?
So I kind of, I worked on Disney Cruise Lines. I did a little bit of teaching, because I realized there was, a number of crew members that were a bit fearful, especially in the life raft drills that you have to do, where they put the jackets on, you go down in a lifeboat, you just see them with their eyes just like wide open, totally petrified. And you're like, hang on, you're living on a metal boat in the middle of the ocean and you're freaking out by being on the ocean. So I started doing, a bit of crew training here and there, because a couple of them had asked me to do that. So that's sort of what started planting the seed. But to get into the coaching, I returned back to Australia after working, overseas, worked with an incredible billionaire family here in Sydney, who, really looked after me. Had some great experiences, some diving trips. So if you can see the photos behind there, if you're watching this, I've got some incredible underwater photography. So
do you put that anywhere online?
I do have a Instagram, but I've got like thousands and thousands of underwater photos. I just don't have time to actually
Okay.
upload them.
I'd
But
love to go look.
Oceanus_media is the Instagram.
I'll be putting that in the show notes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I've got some incredible underwater stuff. And that's my passion as well, underwater photography. So I worked on that boat for about 6 years with that family. And, COVID sort of kicked in and I was sort of looking for a bit of purpose. I moved on and I started sort of doing some coaching just on the side. One day I was out the door from the family. And then I just thought, you know what? I've been wanting to help adults for a while in this space. I've got all this knowledge. So I started, just literally created the name, which is Swimly. And my thought behind it was, well, you don't want to go swimming, you want to go swimly, which the whole ethos around swimly is going relaxed and going easy and going chill. And it's like Australian sort of spin on, that kind of easy way of doing things. And we're Australians, we abbreviate everything and make up our own little words.
There's a bit more behind this though, because I remember you telling me the stats of people drowning, and this actually flabbergasted me when I heard the numbers that you told me, and I'll get you to reiterate them for me actually. The amount of people that drown, in my ignorant mind, it was like, oh yeah, drowning kids because they don't know how to swim. But what you actually told me was completely different, and it kind of put more of a serious aspect on this whole idea of helping people to learn how to swim and feel confident in the water and what the problem's actually about. So can we transition there?
No, absolutely. Because that's what inspired me, right? Obviously the seed was planted going back to that thought process around planting the seed and wanting to do something. I really wanted to help. And I love the water. Obviously I've got a fish tank behind me. I've got, I'm surrounded by it. I love it. And I want people to be able to share that experience as well. And when you look at the statistics, and the more that I've gotten into the business side of things, the more that I've got into the promotion side of things as well, you look at the Royal Life Saving Report that comes out every single year. And on average, 70 to 90% of drownings in this country are people 18 years plus. Now, obviously, it's a larger demographic, but you don't realize that the number is actually 70 to 90%.
Huge.
It's huge.
In that category,
right? And these are people who unfortunately and tragically lose their lives in drowning aspects, not like a boating crash or whatever else, who have actually gone under the water, haven't come back. What really sort of got me was a lot of news stories a couple of years ago talking about 1 in 4 Australians are either non-swimmers or weak swimmers.
Non-swimmers or weak swimmers, meaning they absolutely cannot swim at all, or if they were, good luck in a rip kind of thing.
They can't do to survive. Now you go around, and this is why I'm so passionate about this space as well. We go the typical Australian thing. Oh, that's just the new people coming to the country. That's the immigrants, but they only make up 30% of the numbers. Yes, they are a part of that process, but that's only 30% of the numbers out of like everything, full 100%.
Sure.
And a lot of these are, I hate to say it, but a lot of them are adults that haven't actually got back in the water again after a long period of time. Younger people, obviously it's males that make, poor judgment calls on, their own ability. Mm-hmm. But the ones that I hate are the ones that are the parents that go in to save their kids and they don't come back.
Dies.
Yeah. And that's the one that really gets me because, the child then knows the sacrifice that the parent has made. And I get it. Like any parent would do the same thing. I'm like on a massive push right now, and it's sort of happened over 3 years with my business to really focus on this fear side of adults and why they avoid the water, and trying to become more of a spokesperson around that sort of space. And it's worked. I work with a swim school association here in Australia, the Australian Swim Schools Association, and I frequently talk at their conference about the importance of teaching adults, why we need to teach adults. And the biggest thing that I've found as well is it's not actually trying to get them to swim. This is like, hear me out, because this is a weird way of thinking about it, but it's actually trying to become confident in the water. And the swimming's the byproduct, because as most adults, when I meet them or talk with them, or they come into the business for the very first time, they say, I want to be able to do freestyle. And I'm like, are you able to float? They're like, oh, no, I just want to do freestyle because that's swimming. So it's more the education around what swimming actually is. Definition of swimming is using your arms and legs to move through the water. It's not freestyle. Freestyle is competitive stroke. And funnily enough, freestyle, most people don't even know this. In a freestyle race at the Olympics, you can get in there and do doggy paddle. As long as you don't touch the bottom of the pool. If you can be the world record doggy paddler at the Olympics.
Because it's freestyle.
As long as your feet, exactly, it's freestyle.
Oh
it is a style, it's free. You can do whatever you want. as long as your feet don't touch the bottom. That's
I
it.
don't think you're going to
You
win
could,
like that, but
and you think about, you go back to thinking about Eric the Eel back at Sydney 2000 Olympics.
yeah.
Like he didn't have the perfect stroke, but he was in the very first heat of the 100-meter freestyle. He got down the end, he got back again. He did it in a freestyle sort of way. And, he's like forever hero. Now he's like a swim instructor, swim coach in his native country, which is incredible, right? He's really gone on to take that to the next level. But yeah, the adult aspect is a massive thing in this country. And why I'm passionate about it as well is because if adults don't necessarily swim, they're not going to put their kids in either.
Of course. What's like coming up as a red flag here is there's obviously a big demographic of people that have this fear. They're not speaking up about it. What do you think it is that's stopping them from actually coming forward or engaging someone like you to go and tackle it? What's holding them back?
A lot of it's the psychology. So understanding that there's embarrassment around it. I've taught people in their 50s, 60s, 70s. In fact, the oldest client I had was 92, never put their face in the water.
Mm-hmm.
There is this shame that it looks so easy at why, I should be able to do this. There's a little bit of ego involved as well with it when you think about it. But a lot of it is, it's just something that I haven't done. It's not a priority. It's like what I think about is the upside of it is obviously the exercise, which we know swimming is one of the best forms because it's low impact and it's repetitive. But also too, it's the mental health aspect. So think about it. If you've had a really rough day, when you dive or when you jump into the pool, or even if you have a shower, it just feels like all of that's washing away.
Yeah.
And I know for me, that's probably been the biggest turning point in my life is realizing that the water is my friend and it's a way for me to cleanse and refresh whatever's going on in my world. So if I have some bad news, whatever it is, I will go and just go for a swim, go back to my happy place because that's where I feel calm and connected. Also too, that just gentleness of the water allows you to just let go. Whereas people on the other side, they freak out by it thinking it's going to take them down and take them to the bottom of the abyss.
Sure. Is there any common links between, this imposter syndrome and not feeling like you're good enough to do something? Does that show up for normal people or average people that, are struggling with this? Is there some similarities?
There is an imposter syndrome, especially in the world of like social media. And, we all like to blame social media for stuff, but it does really tarnish the way we look at things.
Mm-hmm.
I know, I'm in that space of creating content and for the business. And it's one of those things where you look at some of the stuff that's on there and it's like, this is way too advanced for average people to understand. But, people will follow that and go, that's the way it should be done. You look at the world's really shifting where we want to learn online, but swimming is not an online thing. And when I teach adults, I had one just prior to this session where we're on here talking now on this podcast. I had an adult and I said, look, this is going to sound really weird, but just stay with me on this. I'm not here to teach you how to swim. And puzzled look on her face. She said, what do you mean? And I said, I'm here to teach you how it feels. And how do you get yourself out of your head so you can stop thinking about all these things that might happen and face the reality of what's actually going to happen? Because for adults, we know what swimming looks like. We watch the Olympics, we watch people at the pool. We all assume that it's really simple, just like walking, but it's completely different, If we all put on spacesuits and went to the moon and started walking around, it would be completely different, right? So that's sort of, I'm training a lot of the psychology and my team are training a lot of the psychology around what it is to be in the water versus, the strokes are like a byproduct of it.
With your understanding around the psychological challenges that adults have around this, like with water trauma, in practice, how do you approach this at Swimly? Like when someone goes, yep, Jason, I want to come and learn with you guys. How are you tackling it?
The hard thing is just like every single person probably listening or watching here, we all learn completely different. As we get older, we become more complicated in the way that we learn. We have more narrative around what we think is the right way versus the wrong way. So if we have, new swimmers coming into the mix, what we'll always try and do is try and understand a little bit about them first. The how, the what, the when, the why. Have you had a negative experience as well is always a question. Are you comfortable in water? Are you comfortable in water where you can't stand up? It's really like unpacking and becoming that personalized service so that they can learn a lot quicker. And I guess the goal of the business, which is, probably not the best goal, but the idea is to get them through as quickly as possible so that they're comfortable but have the right knowledge. Now, I'll give you some context around that, because when I was a scuba diving instructor, when I was learning that sort of process, it's one of those things, obviously you have to have guidelines and you have to do certain things and tick the box. But when I started teaching it, I was at a shop, and in that environment of like having 8 students in the water with a scuba tank on, and I kind of had a few students that were struggling in the water. So then you're like, well, I can't hold up the other 6 for 2. I've got to keep pushing ahead and forging ahead with what we need to do. And like, this is stuff underwater. And like, at first we were in a pool, but then I took one of these students who were a little bit hesitant out into the ocean, because the shop was like, take them out to the ocean. And this is nothing against the shop. This is for me a massive learning, but they're like, if you don't get this person through, you're failed as an instructor. That was sort of the wording that was coming out. And I'm like, okay, cool, being a bit young and a bit naive. So I took that person out to the ocean, took them on a dive to give them the experience of being in the ocean, which was the first dive we did after the pool stuff, just to get the experience of being under the water. And we got down to 5 meters, and that was my very first shooter. And what I mean by that is they went from 5 meters, had a massive panic attack, almost like you see in the opening scene of Jaws, where they sort of freak out, and literally shot up to the surface. Now, you would think that that's normally okay, but if they're holding their breath in the first 5 meters of water that we have, from zero, from sea level to water, is the same pressure depth as going from 0 to 1,000 meters up in the air. So if you're holding that, you can actually have your lungs expand and burst. So
just hearing that gives me anxiety, because I know a little bit about the pressure and how changing it too quickly can be really damaging. But even you having that responsibility of that person, teaching them to dive, then you've got your boss saying, if you don't do this, you're going to fail. I don't know how I would cope with that, if I'm honest. And then having someone freak out underwater. Oh.
It was the freak out that really got me. So what you try and do is you become a dead weight and anchor. So you're trying to pull them back down so you can slow down their ascent. And look, you can't probably get away with it now, but 15 years ago you could. But I guess sometimes it's in demand. I was literally like hitting him in the stomach to get him to breathe, to literally like getting the air to come out so that you knew that he wasn't holding the breath. It wasn't hard punches, obviously. It wasn't, Mike Tyson sort of stuff, but it was enough just to shock him into. And for me, that was a massive learning. So when I take on a fear client like that, I've always got, what's the worst case scenario that's going to happen here? And look, I'm a hyper vigilant person as it is. Even when I'm coaching on pool deck, I always say to lifeguards and duty managers, I'm like another set of eyes for you, because I don't miss much. I've done a few rescues at some of the pools that we work at, because, the lifeguard's been on the other side and I've seen something that's happened really quickly. So, I'm always that sort of personality, but it's really coming back to noticing how the individual person, what they need, what they want, and what ultimately is their goal. That is probably the biggest question. What is your goal? Is your goal to swim laps for the rest of your life? Is your goal to swim laps so you become a master swimmer? Or is your goal just to get into the ocean and have a swim and come back safely? And then we kind of work towards whatever that looks like for them.
And I guess tailoring the program to them as well and getting to know them, I can only imagine that really comes in handy for an instructor, because they can then, depending on what the person does, whether they do freak out or they pick it up really quickly, you can be quite adaptive to that. Yeah.
Yeah. The more you understand something, and I don't say that people have a fear of water. I just say they have a lack of understanding. They might have a negative experience, but it's the lack of understanding that you have around something. Think about it when you drive a car for the very first time. You're petrified, right? All these other people that are really confident around you, whizzing all over you, even with the L plates on, they'll still cut in front of you, especially here in Sydney. It's very much a rat race.
Wild there.
Yeah, really wild.
Particularly in manual. Oh my God.
But you Queensland drivers aren't, that much better either. So, we each have their own, and then you got Melbourne. So yeah, I haven't spent too much time on the other side, but, it's one of those things that we're not as patient. And I think when you're learning something for the very first time, it's the patience to understand how things work and how they respond, Like imagine, you think about when you first learned to drive, trying to get the coordination of the steering, the blinker, the brake. And if you do a manual, adding that clutch into it,
mm-hmm.
It's a rare trait to find a manual car these days, I think now. But yeah, it's one of those things that the more knowledge you have around something, the more you understand it, the easier it is. And that's a big part, especially in our aquaphobia, like fear sessions. And there's a guy in the UK called Mike. I'll give him a free little plug that he created the Institute of Aquaphobia, because in the UK, if you think the numbers in Australia are high with 1 in 4, in the UK it's into like the multi-million number of swimmers or people population that actually don't avoid the water. So you think of here as Australia as a lifestyle country, and that's our lifestyle, the beach culture. Think about somewhere like the UK where they don't have that, how
Mm.
much more prevalent it is there. And a lot of people in the UK go across to Europe to actually spend their summers rather than, going to the beach at the UK. So yeah, it's even more prevalent over there. Um, and that's where I kind of got my grounding, and a lot of the work that I've now done is learning through experience, working with so many different clients around different things.
Just one other thing I would assume as well is by taking the time with them in the beginning to figure out what they want, I guess it would create trust, them to you, so that when they get in the water, it probably increases the likelihood of them not having a freak out or feeling like, okay, cool, I'm supported, and probably get a better result that way as well.
Absolutely. It's taking that time to really understand what they need.
Mm.
The goals vary. I love some of the goals. I've got one coming up this weekend, which is interesting. It's a beginner swimmer that's going to swim in San Francisco out to Alcatraz on a guided tour, and they're not very comfortable in the water.
That prison is freaky.
That's one example. I had another one where it was an Irish guy, and he wanted to go to Capri in
Mhm.
Italy to propose to his wife, and we wanted to jump off one of the boats in the water at Capri and jump back in. And we spent, all the sessions that we did with him just getting the confidence to jump off the edge of the pool to jump into the water. One of the
Man,
funniest clients, and I think this is one of the things that I do love about working with adults, is that you can really relate and be personable. And I like to think I'm a pretty personable sort of guy. You're pretty easy to talk to. And a lot of the sessions we are talking. So I've seen, and I've had a few of the lifeguards around the pools that I've worked at go to me like, do you actually teach anyone how to swim, or are you just sitting there talking? But the funny thing is, the talking is the distraction tool to
yeah.
allow them to achieve the task that I want them to do. It's getting to know them, getting to get that trust, the confidence, and then allowing them to, on their own terms, work out what they need to do. Because yeah, that's a big part of the process, and it's sort of there to hold their hand. And to say that, like, I'm looking forward to the Alcatraz person to see if they can, get their goal. But
Yeah.
the Irish lad, he got it. He got his goal. He went to Capri. Even the boat captain, before he jumped in, said, "Oh mate, don't worry, it's only 300 meters of water below you," just to add an extra element
Just
of like freaking to it. But he messaged me and said that he did it, and he was like really thankful for it. So everybody's got their own personal goals of what they want to achieve.
definitely gives me a different insight into what a swimming coach actually does. It's very cool what you're doing, actually.
And I think I was going to say, like, I think that's one thing I love about what the business is it's
Yeah.
very unique in the way that it does stuff. So you got your adults with trauma, you got your adult stroke correction. We also do like competitive kids as well. So working with those that are aspiring, and then we do ocean sessions. So it's encompassing a whole range of different things,
Yeah.
rather than just your standard laps.
Even with the competitive stuff, you would have to be so dynamic, but also because you've got that experience, you know what those competitive people are lining up for. So you can also give them insight on that as well. That's amazing, actually.
The funny thing is, it's really simple. Like what I try and do with those, especially if I'm doing like mindset or even like your stroke correction session, I
Mm,
go back to what I wish I knew at that age.
sure.
What I wish I knew from all my life experience in the world of like not just swimming, but in the world, what I wish I knew at that age, and try and give that to the younger swimmers that I work with. So I do love that aspect, especially the mindset stuff,
Yeah.
and the mindset of young kids these days is like, if I don't have so many followers, if I'm not on social, if I'm not this, if I'm not that, and the massive like anxiety around the way that they are, the image, that sort of thing as well, which is a big thing. And I love helping young kids with that.
And it's so interesting too, because all of that stuff is so irrelevant compared to actually getting in and knowing how to swim and hit your goal in relation
Yeah,
to swimming. Like, the fact that it even gets
absolutely.
in the way, it's so nuts.
It's crazy, right?
When it comes to what you actually offer, right? Like, obviously, you serve a variety of people. They might have just a simple goal. They might have Olympic goals, whichever it is. How does the packages work, and how does somebody go? Like, what does the system look like in practice, beginning to end?
So beginning to end, the whole Swimly ethos is like it's swimming with a difference. And the difference is that it's more the personalized approach. So we only do smaller groups and private one-on-one sessions. I would say probably 70% of the business is the private one-on-one sessions. People want that personalized touch.
Hmm.
And then, as I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, it's broken into the core components of like the adults with trauma, adults with fear, adult stroke correction, or, adult beginner swimmers. And then we go into the competitive side, which actually has like mindset and all different levels. So whether you're like a club swimmer, a state swimmer, or a top of the line, national swimmer, we have different levels. And then we have the ocean side as well. So, the business has grown. Like I started it 4 years ago, just outside of COVID when the pools opened back up again. And it's now I've got a team of what I have a team of 5, about to be 6 other instructors who work with me. And we're kind of growing that size, where I was doing about 90% of everything.
Hmm.
And now I'm trying to like step back a little bit more and go on in and a little bit more targeted in the approach. So work with the elite packages that we have, like adult fear packages that we have, and the ocean sessions for me, like passing on that ocean knowledge. Because I didn't even mention as well, I was heavily involved in surf life saving growing up as well. So that was a big part of my life. And I trained with some of the best Iron men and women of the time back in Wollongong. And one of them, great, like twin brothers, Dean and Darren Mercer, who are massive ocean Ironman guys. Unfortunately, Dino was my idol growing up. He was like 5 foot something, and I was like 6'3". His stroke, so his arms would turn over 60 strokes per minute, whereas mine would be about 40 to 45. So that showed you how hard he was working each time.
Yeah.
So he was my biggest inspiration kind of growing up. And unfortunately, in his 40s, he had a massive heart attack about 10 years ago. And just fell off. He was renowned as like the guy who had the heart. He was always the guy that would, if you ever go back and watch some of the Uncle Toby's or Kellogg's Nutri-Grain series that he raced in, he would
Mm.
always be just digging deep. So yeah, that was a massive shock for me. And I think, having some purpose around what we're doing is to inspire people to get out there. And I guess that's the core of the business. Like the ocean stuff is one part that I want to get somebody from the fear all the way through to being comfortable in the ocean.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So yeah.
If you had any advice for someone out there that was listening to all of this and they felt inspired to go, you know what,
Mhm.
I'm going to go and tackle this swimming fear, what advice would you give them?
The biggest advice that I would give is you have to go and you have to try. You have to put yourself outside of the comfort zone, and just remember that it doesn't matter where you go, you're in a controlled environment. So even if the lessons don't work for you, that's totally fine. There's plenty of options out there. And I'm a massive advocate. Like if it doesn't work with us at Swimly, I'm more than happy to send you to, 5 other places that it might work for you. So it's not about competition. And they always talk about that in the business world. It's competing, we're competing on this, but we're not. We're all teaching the same thing in a different way with a different way to do it. But the
Hmm.
end goal is all the same. And that's to make sure people are comfortable in the water and reduce drownings. So the advice is go. And the other piece that most adults fail at is that they don't practice. They're too ashamed to practice. And the way I describe this is you don't go to a language lesson once or twice, a week for a month, and then go to the country and expect to be fluent in the language. You
100%.
have to actually practice and immerse yourself in it. And a lot of the times, and I always say this to the clients that we work with, is that you will pick a lot of this up. We're giving you the tools. You're going to go away and build your house. We're going to come back and we're going to tweak it and improve it. And then you're going to go away, continue building it. And that's sort of the process that we use at Swimly. And knowing that there's no right or wrong, because even if you go to a pool, even if you go to the beach and swim in the flags, obviously don't do any of this outside of the flags. In a controlled environment where people are watching you, that's where it's always going to be the safest place to be. And just know that there are people there. One of the best things you can do as a beginner swimmer is go up to the lifeguards and just say, hey, look, I'm a beginner. Are you able to just keep a pair of eyes on me? And then that gives you the reassurance in the back of your mind that actually somebody's sort of there watching you. They're not going to
Yeah.
stand there and watch you like a hawk, but they might, depending on your level. But they will actually, a lot of lifeguards, and I was one myself, they would
Mm.
appreciate that, because rather than you're like trying to do stuff and they're like, are you okay? Are you not? They know straight away to watch you. So that would be my advice, and just do it. Like it will open up a world. Look behind you. Obviously, mine's had the swimming career, but look at all the underwater creatures that you have that you can actually go and see. And to see Nemo in the real reef is pretty
Yeah,
damn incredible,
I
rather
love
than
it.
watching him on TV.
Let's say somebody in Sydney was listening and they want to hit you up because they love what you've talked about. What's the best next step for them?
Yeah, look, to jump online, to go to swimly.com.au. You can follow us on Instagram at GoSwimly. I have my own personal brand as well, which I'm growing on Instagram, called Jason Cram Swim. So if you want to find some insights, I have my 2 young daughters. I got a 2-year-old and a 6-month-old that are
Wow.
loving the water. So kind of putting a bit of their journey, a little bit of their journey. I don't want to be that kind of parent, but a bit of their experience in the water and what to do in the water with them. But the biggest thing is, feel free to reach out to us as well, because we are heavily connected around Australia, and we could probably guide you. We're looking to expand as we grow, up to Queensland, especially towards the Olympics, getting more people involved in the sport. And I know within the industry as a whole, so from like Royal Life Saving level to Surf Life Saving Australia to Swimming Australia as well, all of the governing bodies are trying to get this really pushed to get the community involved in swimming again. And I know it was a massive thing in the lead up to Sydney Olympics. So because obviously swimming is our dominant sport, and I know over the next sort of 7 years, leading into Brisbane, there's going to be this massive push to get the community back involved in swimming and being comfortable in the water.
That's
Yeah, feel
awesome.
free to reach out to us and we can steer you whichever way, because we want everybody to involved and be comfortable and happy in the water.
Just one last burning question, too.
Yeah,
So,
please do.
thinking about it, because you are only localized, and yes, you can direct people in other places because you're connected in Australia, is there any space for online learning in some way with swimming?
Absolutely. Me and the team, we're working on an online course at the moment. So you can follow us for updates. We're looking at calling it Swimming Simplified. So really simplifying the way you actually learn. There's a whole heap of little short courses that we're building in the meantime as well. For those parents that are listening with competitive swimmers, we already have a mindset course up and running as we speak. And yeah, looking to do some mindset stuff around the fear of water. So there's a lot of aspects that, as a business, we're growing, but as a dad with 2 young kids and a sort of trying to balance the demanding business role and demanding parent role, we're trying to do as much as we can. But ultimately, within the next sort of 5 to 6 months, we want to have it live so that people can practice through winter and then get ready for summer.
I was going to say that mindfulness piece is probably the best. I mean, because it is such an impactful part of what we've just discussed. It could be a great primer online, like to get all of those foundations in, because it is all mental. It's not even about being in the water yet. So I love that. Okay, cool. That's all my questions. Thank you so much for this chat today. It was bloody awesome getting to know you.
Oh, thank you so much. I hope the listeners get a lot out of this, and absolutely feel free to reach out, because the more we connect with people, and that's how I built my business. It's all by connecting with people. You can grow into anything, and yeah, there's a whole world to explore under the water. Watch some of the James Cameron stuff, like his latest Avatar. It's crazy.
Sweet. Thanks, Jason. You have a good day.
Thank you too.